At one point in time, it seemed like Justin Bieber had the world in his hands. Millions of fans, chart-topping hits, and a career most artists could only dream of. But while his rise to fame seemed like every teen's Hollywood dream, his fall from grace was a full-blown nightmare, one that left scars deeper than time could ever heal. Because behind the smiles and all the record-breaking hits, awards, and accolades was a man being chewed up and spat out by the very industry that made him. And, if some fans are to be believed, the woman he married. See, when Justin hooked up with Hailey Baldwin in 2018, just a few months after officially cutting off his 8-year-long on-and-off relationship with Selena Gomez, the internet was split right down the middle, and for very obvious reasons. Besides the insane stalker allegations hanging over Hailey's head, and the fact that Justin had built a reputation for being a druggie, he was now public enemy number one for breaking the heart of a Disney fan favorite. But even with all of the hate, no one would have ever thought that the same kid who was lighting up the charts even before turning 18 would someday be on the verge of losing his mind. But how exactly did we get here? Well, today we're going to take a closer look into the turbulent life of one of the biggest pop stars to ever live and find out exactly what caused the dark decline of Justin Bieber.
I felt like, bro, I was like dying. My security and stuff were coming into the room at night to check my pulse. Like, people don't know how serious it got. Like, it was legit crazy scary. I was waking up in the morning and the first thing I was doing is popping pills and smoking a blunt and starting my day.
It was hard for me being that young and being in the industry and not knowing where to turn, and everyone, telling me they love me and, just turn their back on you in a second.
Breaking news right now, Justin Bieber, the singer and teen heartthrob, arrested.
Mr. Bieber, you are charged with the following: DUI, alcohol or drugs, resisting without violence, and driving with an expired driver's license.
There was a time where I was sipping lean, I was popping pills, I was doing Molly, shrooms, everything. And it was just an escape for me. I was just young, like everybody.
To really understand just how dark things got, we've got to look at how this fairy tale started and why it was never really as sweet as it looked. Back in 2007, Justin began uploading videos of himself singing covers of popular songs on YouTube, usually from his living room, and on stage at local talent shows. But it didn't take long before those videos started picking up steam and catching the attention of anyone with an ear for talent. One of those people being talent manager and marketing executive Scooter Braun, who would actually stumble across one of Justin's videos, and the moment he heard that voice, he was hooked.
So when I saw Justin, while everyone told me no and everyone thought I was crazy, I knew exactly what to do.
Braun tracked Justin down through the theatre that he was performing at and got in touch with his mother Patty and convinced her to fly to Atlanta with Justin to meet some of the industry's biggest names. But that plane didn't take off right away, as Patty wasn't exactly on board with shipping her 13-year-old son off to the music industry wolves. However, after some convincing from her church community, she eventually gave in, and just like that, Justin was officially on his way to becoming the most famous teenager on the planet. After releasing his breakout single One Time and his debut EP My World in 2009, he immediately caught the public's attention, becoming the first artist ever to have all 7 songs from his debut EP chart on the Billboard 100, 4 of these charting even before the release of the project.
So as you guys all know, I'm from a little town in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, a town of 30,000 people, and I never dreamed this day would come. My album is in stores, and I'm just so excited. You guys made my dreams come true, and like I said, I never thought this would happen, so thank you guys so much, and I really appreciate it. Alright.
But as impressive as that was for a kid his age, Bieber was just getting started. And in 2010, his song Baby would become a global mega hit, whilst also taking over YouTube and snatching the crown from Lady Gaga's Bad Romance by becoming the most watched video on the platform. Over the next decade, Justin would have an insane career run that earned him numerous global hit singles and albums, esteemed awards like Grammys, multiple AMAs, and countless other trophies, and even several Guinness World Records. But after rolling out hit after hit for a decade and achieving the kind of success most people can't even dream of, Justin's career came to a shocking halt in 2019 when he announced he would be taking an indefinite hiatus from music, 6 months after getting married to his girlfriend Hailey. It seemed like he had moved past the slump after he dropped his Justice album in 2021, which would once again top the charts and include several global hit songs such as Peaches, Holy, and Anyone. But then in 2023, instead of dropping a new project, the news would drop that Justin was actually selling all the rights of his entire back catalogue. Now this by itself seems quite normal these days, as many artists have seemingly calculated that they'll end up actually making making more money by investing the hundreds of millions that they would make from such deals rather than collecting their royalties year after year. But with Justin, there seemed to be much more going on, because behind the scenes, he wasn't just stepping away from the fame, he was visibly falling apart. One of the biggest red flags has been Justin's physical appearance, which has people genuinely worried for his health. And between the sunken cheeks, the half-awake eyes, and that whole just rolled out of a dumpster behind a yoga studio vibe, it was hard not to be. But for many fans, the things really hit a new level of troubling when he showed up to one of Hailey's skincare pop-ups looking like this. I mean, this is the same guy who once had teenage girls screaming their guts out at the mere sight of him. Now he's looking like Pete Davidson if he hadn't slept for 3 years. But for those who had been paying attention, this didn't just come out of nowhere. The signs of Justin's mental decline have been visible for years, long before Hailey even entered the picture. And while it seems like a classic case of the consequences of addiction on the surface, the reality is much darker than you could imagine. Having risen to fame at such an early age, Justin was exposed to the pressures and expectations that came with that life. But beyond having to deal with that pressure, he was also having to deal with something even more damaging, being surrounded by adults in Hollywood who couldn't keep their hands to themselves. After announcing him as a winner for the Pop Rock Album of the Year during the 2012 Music Awards, 40-year-old Jenny McCarthy pulled a barely 18-year-old Justin by the neck and planted one on him and grabbed his behind, making Justin and every reasonable person in sight visibly uncomfortable. And while McCarthy later tried to play it off as a joke in an interview, none of that made it any less weird. If anything, it made the moment slightly creepier.
Great, I just got to neck Justin Bieber and grab his butt.
I saw that you totally, it was like a full-on almost makeout session.
A little cougar scary.
Yeah.
But I took the opportunity in the window, considering I'll never get to do it again, and kind of molested him.
But Jenny was far from the only celebrity who crossed the line with a young Justin. At just 16 years old, he was already being treated in ways that no teenager should have had to endure, especially not in front of cameras and live audiences. For instance, James Corden tried to seemingly flirt with Justin during the Brit Awards in 2011.
You smell amazing. How old are you?
Thank you.
I don't ever remember smelling that good at 16. That was bad. Wow, look at your eyes.
And by the time he was 18, even Katy Perry was out here openly grabbing Justin's cheeks during a meet and greet at the Capital FM Summertime Ball. And that's not even getting into the countless interviews where a still teenage Justin was asked disturbingly inappropriate and sexually charged questions by grown adults who really should have known better.
My parents never gave me this sock.
Okay.
So why don't you give me this sock?
I feel uncomfortable right now. Oh, why do you want to know this sock from a 15-year-old boy? That's pretty weird.
Now, if they saw no issue with sexualizing a child so publicly, it really makes you wonder what might have been happening in private. At the time, a lot of people brushed it off as harmless banter or just chalked it up to the price of fame, but in reality, the constant objectification and sexual harassment of a young Justin Bieber would likely take a toll on him that would weigh on his shoulders for years. As the world watched his every move in the midst of chaos and fame, there wasn't genuinely anyone holding him up, not even his mother. That kind of pressure doesn't just go away, it builds up, and eventually it spills over. And like many before him, Justin found an escape in the same thing that's ruined the lives of some of the brightest stars in Hollywood: drugs. He was trying to quiet everything down, the judgment, the expectations, the pain from the abuse that he hadn't even begun to process. And once he started slipping and sipping, the public was quick to notice. In 2013, people got their first real glimpse of a different Justin Bieber when a photo of him holding a blunt hit the internet. For the fans who still saw him as the squeaky clean heartthrob, it felt like a shock to the system, and for the critics, it was exactly the proof they'd been waiting for that Justin was going to be yet another young star crashing out under the weight of his own fame. And sadly, they weren't necessarily wrong, because over the years that followed, Justin's substance abuse would make him somewhat of a regular in police reports. In 2014 alone, he got arrested multiple times, including one infamous night in Miami for allegedly driving under the influence, driving with an expired license, and resisting arrest. He would admit to drinking, smoking, and popping prescription pills, and ended up spending around 10 hours in a cell before getting out on a $2,500 bond, and when the toxicology report dropped, it was confirmed that he had THC and Xanax in his system. And from there, things would only go even further downhill. From weed and Xans, he would turn to Molly and lean. And for those that aren't in the hip-hop world, lean is basically prescription cough syrup containing both opiate codeine and cough suppressant promethazine, often mixed with soda and hard candy for flavor, an expensive and arguably prestigious drink in hip-hop circles. And while it might sound like a little bit of harmless fun, the reality is, Lean has built a solid reputation for ruining lives and triggering crash outs much faster than regular fame could. Around this time, Justin was commonly seen hanging around rappers like Lil Wayne, a known lean aficionado, which likely didn't help with Justin's budding addiction issues, and several sources close to Justin would report seeing him, quote, zonked out on multiple occasions around this time. And by the time the addiction really had him in the chokehold, his head was so messed up that his own security had to regularly check if he was still breathing at night just to make sure he hadn't OD'd in his sleep. Now, in one of the most wild turn of events, in April of 2014, pharmaceutical company Actavis actually announced that they were pulling their highly popular codeine promethazine cough syrup off the market due to widespread recreational abuse. With this coming around the time that Justin Bieber was being seen frequently sipping in public, leading many people like 2 Chainz to suggest that Bieber bringing all this attention to lean is actually the reason that it got banned. Whatever the case though, that addiction wasn't just some phase, it was a dark period that affected Justin for years to come. And sometime after this, Justin would end up making a life-changing decision, with the world reacting in shock when he announced his sudden engagement to Hailey Baldwin. So who exactly is Hailey Baldwin? And most importantly, how did she become Mrs. Bieber in the blink of an eye? Child of actor Stephen Baldwin, the least successful of the famous Baldwin brothers, and his partner, graphic designer Kenya Deodato, Hailey Rhoda Baldwin grew up very close to the celebrity lifestyle. But really, she's never exactly been a major celebrity in her own right. Growing up in these elite circles, she started modeling as a teenager, but there were times when the paparazzi didn't even recognize her.
Hey, you famous too?
Which one was that? Really, how do you feel about Justin Bieber being?
But what many people don't know is that Hailey was actually a believer long before becoming Miss Bieber. Their first meeting was like a fan fiction come to life, as a 12-year-old Hailey was brought up by her father to the Today Show, where Justin was performing in 2009, introducing them to each other.
Hey, John, my name's Steve.
And the third song,
This is my daughter, Hailey.
The third song is...
Yeah.
By 2014, Hailey and Justin were running in the same social circles, primarily through their connection to Hillsong Church, the celebrity-filled megachurch that later became Justin's spiritual home during some of his darkest times. And although they insisted they were just friends, the two were spotted cozying up at various events and family gatherings. But it wasn't until 2016 that Justin and Hailey briefly dated, with Justin posting a New Year's photo of them locking lips. Now, this caught a ton of people off guard, because for starters, Hailey had been publicly bigging up Jelena a couple of years earlier, this being a nickname for Bieber's long-term relationship with his teenage sweetheart Selena Gomez. In fact, in 2011, she made a now deleted tweet calling Justin's relationship with Selena Gomez a teenage dream, but at the time, most people charged it to teen drama, especially because the relationship was short-lived. Their breakup was so brutal that Hailey later described it as a very dramatic excommunication. And for the next year or so, Justin rekindled things with Selena, while Hailey reportedly went on to date Shawn Mendes. But in 2018, that's when things really got interesting, or suspicious, depending on who you ask. Because in June that year, Justin was spotted with Hailey at a church conference. By July, they were engaged, and by September, they were legally married in a New York courthouse. To many fans of Justin, this timeline felt like an emotional whiplash in real time, given that he had just spent 8 years tangled up in a rollercoaster relationship with Selena, going from on again to off again to back on, back off, only to turn around and put a ring on someone else less than 3 months after their final split. And as you'd expect, the speed of this reunion to marriage pipeline raised a lot of eyebrows. Some fans wondered if Hailey had been playing the long game all along, and others just saw her as an opportunist who capitalized on Justin's emotional vulnerability after his final breakup with Selena. With gossip magazines boosting these theories by creating narratives of Hailey being a rebound girl who somehow managed to seal the deal before Justin could come to his senses. But the most concerning theory is that Hailey, intentionally or not, might have contributed to Justin's mental decline by rushing him into marriage before he was emotionally stable enough to make such a commitment fresh out of a toxic relationship. But whatever the reality might be, Hailey and Justin just kept smiling for the cameras and ignoring the noise. Except there was one thing that fans just couldn't ignore. What exactly was Selena thinking? Justin and Hailey got together so quickly after his final breakup with Selena that it created a deep divide in pop culture. Team Selena versus Team Hailey became the new Bloods versus Crips. And for years, Hailey has had to fight a hard battle against the perception that she stole Justin from Selena. And despite both women claiming there's no beef between them, their fans have kept the feud alive with remarkable dedication, especially with all of the shade that Hailey has allegedly been caught throwing. For instance, in October 2019, Selena released her song, Love You to Love Me, containing lyrics widely interpreted to be about Justin's quick pivot to Hailey. Lines like, "In 2 months you replaced us like it was easy," seem to directly reference the timeline of Justin and Hailey's relationship. Hours after the song's released, Hailey would post a screenshot of Summer Walker's song, I'll Kill You, on her Instagram story, which appeared to be a bit more than just a coincidence. Although according to Hailey, that's all it was, but fans weren't buying it. and over the years, it became clear why. In 2023, things reached a boiling point when Selena posted a TikTok joking about how she'd accidentally over-laminated her eyebrows. Shortly after, Kylie Jenner, a close friend of Hailey's, posted an Instagram story showing a close-up of her eyebrows with the caption, "This was an accident." It seemed like a shot at Selena, especially considering the fact that Kylie and Hailey later posted a screenshot from their video call, both of them zoomed in on their eyebrows. While Kylie denied that any shade was intended, and Selena seemed to agree, the damage was done. And Hailey would end up losing over 1 million followers, while Selena gained over 12 million and became the most followed woman on the platform. And as if the Selena drama wasn't enough, Hailey also found herself tangled in a feud with Taylor Swift, Selena's best friend, who was also friends with Justin before he threw Selena under the bus. This web of celebrity feuds might seem petty on the surface, but to most people, the writing on the wall was clear. Hailey has consistently positioned herself in opposition to the women who were important to Justin just before her. Whether this was a deliberate move to isolate them or simply the result of natural tensions is up for a debate. But what's not, though, is that behind all the public displays of affection, Justin and Hailey's relationship was a far cry from the picture-perfect story they were trying to sell, and it was only a matter of time before it began to spill over into the public eye, because by now, the cracks weren't just in the headlines, they were written all over Justin's face, and as much as they smiled for the cameras, the mask was finally slipping. In his 2021 GQ interview, Justin dropped what might be the understatement of the century when he admitted that the first year of marriage was difficult because of his built-in trauma. Difficult wouldn't even begin to cover what was seemingly going down behind closed doors, and the crazy part is that no one noticed until the images of his infamous public crying sessions begun to pop up, with Justin being photographed numerous times having full-on emotional breakdowns all over the city. Team Hailey would argue that these were just therapeutic moments with his supportive wife helping him to process these emotions, and maybe that is true, maybe it was therapeutic, but when a grown man's trauma spills out in broad daylight like that, it's usually a symptom of something very deep, very dark, and negative. It's easy to look at him now and forget how long the damage had been piling up, but again, this is the same kid who grew up with the world watching and unfortunately touching. That trauma didn't disappear, it just aged with him, quietly, until it couldn't anymore. What came next was the denials. Year after year, these two have been swearing up and down that everything's peachy in their relationship. But most people aren't buying the PR spin, and one headline would raise a lot of eyebrows. When Hailey would straight up unfollow Justin after he went live on Instagram, flexing his abs and aggressively rapping along to a new track that fans would immediately theorize was throwing shade towards Selena, who had just dropped an album with her fiancé Benny Blanco. Later, Hailey would claim the unfollowing was just a glitch, but the timing definitely had people asking questions given the dark turn Justin's life seemed to have taken since tying the knot. But really, to be fair on Hailey, things were already pretty dark before she came along, not to mention the toll that Justin's own health issues have taken, especially after he was diagnosed with Ramsay-Hunt syndrome in 2022.
I have this syndrome called Ramsay-Hunt syndrome.
Now that they've got a child together, some people are hoping that fatherhood might bring Justin the peace that he's been looking for. But then again, when your life is such a chaotic, paparazzi-riddled mess, can you ever really find peace? When you grow up in such a traumatizing industry as a child star, it's hard to get past the scars of the past. Justin is an incredible artist, but arguably, he's had to go through some of the most dark and disturbing parts of the industry to get where he is in life. And nowadays, it seems like his past is something that he would rather forget and move on from. Who knows if it's his past or this sudden relationship that's caused his mental decline. Hopefully he finds himself to a positive place where he can feel content and hopefully start making good art once again. But if he decides to leave the industry, disappear into the shadows and shun the limelight forevermore, I think a lot of us will understand.